You are tuned in to On Air with Chris Shanafelt.
Good evening and welcome to On Air with Chris Shanafelt. I am your host, Chris Shanafelt, obviously. You guys can listen to the show live on my website, christianshanafelt.com. Pretty hard to spell. ChristianShanafelt. That is my name. I am your host. When I thought about a website, maybe I should have thought of more of a creative name. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Glad you guys are with us this evening. Have a really jam-packed show, a special announcement at the very end of the show. But again, still have a whole show to get to. Excited to tell you guys about that, though. But first, let me tell you about our guest list for tonight. In just a minute, I'll be talking with 2019 NFL Draft prospect, one of those guys they call a diamond in the rough. He's defensive end John Cominsky out of the University of Charleston, a Division II school in West Virginia, a program that maybe you aren't too familiar with, especially when it comes to college football. Excited to learn more about the University of Charleston and the prospect that is John Cominsky. Again, in just a moment, he'll actually be down in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl this time in 1 week. So excited to talk about that, his journey, and much more. Once we're finished talking with John, we will then welcome onto the show a great friend of the show, George Bremer from the Herald, Bulletin in Indianapolis. We'll talk about the Colts up and down season, or I should say down and up season, starting 1-5, finishing in the divisional round of the playoffs. They were bounced by the Kansas City Chiefs last weekend. Talk to George about that. Also, we are in Chicago. Who did the Bears just hire last Friday as their new defensive coordinator? That would be Chuck Pagano, the former head coach of the Indianapolis Colts for a number of years until he was let go at the end of last season. So we'll learn more about Chuck Pagano from our good friend George Bremer from the Herald Bulletin. But without any further ado, let's get to that guest list, and let's welcome onto the show John Cominsky, the defensive end out of the University of Charleston, 2019 NFL Draft prospect. John, really appreciate you hopping on the show this evening. How's everything going?
Hi, Chris. How are you doing? I'm doing really well.
I'm doing great. I'm doing even better that you're here with us, John. Was really excited to do some research and knock this interview out. I want to start off first things first. Again, as I said, the University of Charleston, a Division II program in West Virginia, not necessarily known for college football. And here you are, like I said, in 1 week you'll be in Mobile, Alabama, participating in the Reese Senior Bowl. Again, the top of the top, the best of the best when it comes to college football's finest. Will be there. You'll be battling it out with them among NFL scouts from all 32 NFL teams. What was your reaction when you found out the news that you were invited to the Senior Bowl?
Well, I was actually in the middle of class, and I received a text message from my defensive line coach to get up to his office, and he oftentimes bothers me to come up to his office, so I thought it was just another day. I come up there, and he's teary-eyed, and I knew right away what it was because there was, the rumor was out there that I had a chance to get invited to the Senior Bowl, and I couldn't help but to burst into tears and give him a big hug. So I was really excited.
Absolutely. And when you get to Mobile, again, we're only a week away, and from here, time's really going to fly. I'm sure, especially for you, you're going to be crazy busy, whether it's interviews with Joe Schmoes like myself or big-time events like the Senior Bowl, and who knows what else is in your future. But when it comes to the Senior Bowl, it's obviously going to be the biggest event to start your NFL draft process. When you get down to Mobile, what are a couple things that you have listed that you want to show NFL scouts that you're capable of doing?
First and foremost, I want to show, the same level of dominance that I showed at the Division II level. Obviously, my competition was limited at, University of Charleston, Mountain East Conference. It's not the biggest and the best, obviously. So now I have an opportunity to, show out against all SEC kids, all Big Ten kids, and I just want to be able to carry that level of dominance over to that level. And then the other thing is just having a fun time. I mean, I'm so excited. Obviously, this is the biggest game of my career. So I'm just really excited. And then on top of that, I just want to show some level of dominance. I want to stick out. I want to make a name for myself there.
John, you're listed on your school website, 6'5", 275. So certainly not undersized, and again, limited tape out there on you in the interweb. But of course, NFL scouts can get what they want. But from the little bit that I've seen, you certainly shown that you dominated at the Division II level, reigning MEC Mountain East Defensive Player of the Year. How did you wind up at the University of Charleston? How did being from Ohio, how did your journey lead you to the University of Charleston?
Okay, so, well, high school ball, I played a little bit of quarterback, believe it or not. I was about an inch shorter and about 70 pounds lighter, and I played quarterback. I was out of position, but I was the biggest, fastest kid on the team, and Coach, I guess, had no choice but to put the ball in my hands. So I was a high school quarterback, definitely not my position, going into college ball or the NFL. So I was a little undersized. I was kind of a string bean. I'm playing quarterback. I don't have much film on a position that I would actually play at the college level, and I think obviously I got overlooked. And so I was a late bloomer, and this Division II school, University of Charleston, it was honestly it was my only offer, scholarship offer, and it was really last minute, and that's just kind of how it worked out. I had a teacher within the school system who was an ex-football coach, had a connection down here, sent him my tape, next calling me and offered me a scholarship. So I got overlooked. I had some preferred walk-on opportunities, but, I wanted the scholarship. I wanted to be able to say that I got a scholarship to play college football. So that's how that worked out for me.
And how about your development at the defensive end position on the defensive line? How much of what we've seen over the past few years is a credit to the coaching staff? Of course, you were the one that put in the work. You were the one that was in the weight room. You were the one that was had your head in the playbook. But how much of your development would you credit to your coaching staff, specifically your defensive line coach, Zach Santala?
Well, I had my defensive line coach when I initially was there. His name was David Hill. He basically laid the foundation for all my defensive line knowledge. I had no knowledge, so I had a blank slate, and he basically laid out, the guidelines to defensive line. And then I played with him for a couple of years, and then Coach Santala came in, was able to clean up a couple more aspects of my game. So, yeah, I credit both the defensive line coaches and my head coach, Patrick Kirkland, was a defensive coordinator sitting in even with the film with the linebackers and the defensive backs. I was able to expand my knowledge from there and apply it to the defensive line to really understand the defense. So, yeah, obviously the coaches have helped me a lot. And then besides just the technical aspect, just the motivation, the pick-me-ups all the time, they did that a lot that for me.
Again, he's the reigning Mountain East Conference Defensive Player of the Year, John Cominsky, defensive end, out of University of Charleston, getting ready for the 2019 NFL Draft. But first, he has a big stop to make in Mobile, Alabama, for the Senior Bowl. John, for you, what does it mean to not only put Division II football kind of on the map this draft season, but the University of Charleston? Again, like I said in the opening, it's not every season you hear about a player of this caliber come out of the University of Charleston, or again, really every year it's pretty rare when you see a Division II guy, Division III guy kind of make their name known and get this Senior Bowl invite. For you, what's it mean to put the University of Charleston, what's it mean to put your school, your football team on the map?
Well, first of all, at a personal level, defy the odds and make it through this and take this, this rare path to get to this point. And then as far as all the others, I can't help but think about all the underclassmen that I played with, through my years, all these kids that I see have this great talent that I think could take them to the NFL. And now a guy coming out of University of Charleston, they're going to get more of a heavy look because, oh, well, this guy came out of the University of Charleston. Maybe they're producing some other players. So these players that maybe would get overlooked, maybe they're borderline NFL, maybe not NFL. It gives them much more of a chance. So I just can't help but think of all the underclassmen, all the brothers I've made through football, just giving them that chance. So that personally, that's how it feels for me. And then also throughout the whole nation, now I'm having, the rest of Division II is now getting maybe more of a respect as far as NFL play. So it from a personal level to nationwide, it means a lot to me. So it's really exciting, and I'm glad to be the one that had the opportunity to go through this process.
And when NFL scouts turn on your film, they're not just watching, or you're not the only one that's on that film. Your teammates are on there as well, so that's a big opportunity as well. Just the fact that NFL scouts are not only watching you, but some of your teammates as well that might jump out on the screen. University of Charleston, how does it feel to have that small school label that's attached to you? I mean, is that something that you kind of will take and thrive on over the years, or even just talking the next few months? Would you say that this kind of gives you an added chip to your shoulder, knowing that or when you're in Mobile, having your helmet on, you're probably going to have guys, hey man, where are you from? Where's that helmet logo from? Wow, you'll probably have guys from the University of Oregon or University of Oklahoma, Alabama, and so on and so forth. And then you'll have the one helmet from the University of Charleston. Is that something that you kind of take pride in? I mean, it almost sounds like that you take pride in taking this unique route to get to where you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely proud of the way it's happened for me. To be the only guy out there with that Golden Eagle helmet on there and nobody knows what it is. I got guys coming up and asking me, yeah, I mean, I do take pride in that. And then obviously it is a chip on the shoulder because I'm going to be playing with these guys and I'm going to be winning reps and I'm going to be like, I should have been with you guys all along, but, it happened the way it happened. I controlled what I can control. So, I do have that chip on that shoulder. I didn't have the opportunity to play in front of the big crowds and the big bowl games that they did. And, that's my chip. That's my chip. It's, I deserved to be there all along with those guys, with the guys I'm going to be going against. So, yeah, there's my chip on my shoulder. And then obviously, yeah, I take a lot of pride in being the only one, with that helmet on because, who's to say any of these guys would be where they're at if they were in my shoes. So, I do take pride in, defying the odds and taking that rare path and making the most of my opportunity. And, here I am. I'm here with you. I'm here with Division I players. I'm here with Defensive Player of the Years from SEC, Big Ten. It's really exciting. So everything around me, I'm just, taking it in, taking pride in it, and then, just taking it all in.
A lot of prospects up to this point, John, they're probably getting ready for the combine, getting ready for their pro day. Tell us how you've been preparing for the Senior Bowl up to this point. You still have one more college game to play, while a lot of these guys are already totally finished. How have you been preparing for the Senior Bowl up to this point? Have you been working with any specialists out there, any coaches, any teachers? Update us on that, can you?
Yeah, I have a terrific trainer. His name's Derek Touche, and he works in Naples. That's been my personal trainer, work on flexibility, strength, power development. And then I had the awesome opportunity to work with Brian Cox, who was a three-time Pro Bowler, and he was on the Super Bowl team with the Patriots, and also Dave Wanstead, who's had an NFL, coaching career for 40 years, 40-plus years with college and NFL combined. So I've had significant resources, significant knowledge, and learning from the best. I mean, Brian Cox was one of the best outside linebackers to play the game, and he took pride in his pass rush. So I got to learn a lot of technical aspects from him. And then Dave Wanstead, just the X's and O's, being able to work on the board, being critiqued with, my body demeanor and my body language at the board that I'm going to be needing to possess in these interviews. So I've had the opportunity to work with those two great coaches, and also Bobby Slowick, who's an ex-defensive coordinator in the NFL, helping with the X's and O's and, just technical aspects on the field. So I've had the great opportunity to work with three amazing coaches, and I got to spend a week with them last week Got to learn a lot. I probably learned a lot more last week than I have, my whole life as far as football goes, because I'm learning from the best. So I have that advantage. And then also just working with Derek here in the training facility, working on my power, my explosion, my technique. So I've had a lot of outstanding resources, and I think it's definitely going to be served to my advantage.
That's the voice of John Cominsky, the 2019 NFL Draft prospect, the defensive end out of Division II's University of Charleston, reigning Conference Defensive Player of the Year, here on air with Chris Shanafelt. And John, for those who are not familiar with your game, like I said, kind of hard to access University of Charleston games around the nation. A lot easier to get the University of Oregon, the Pac-12, the SEC, the Big Ten football games. For those not familiar with your game, how would you describe it?
My game is definitely dominant. I'm a raw player. My technique is not perfect, but I play hard. If someone's watching me from afar, they're gonna see, man, that kid can play some ball. He's got some work to do, but he's gonna be an outs player. So you're gonna see a raw but strong and fast and physical player. So and I make myself well known on the field. I'm obvious when I'm on the field. You just know I'm there because I dominate my 5-yard, 10-yard radius of the field wherever I'm at. So it's definitely dominant would be the best word to describe.
And, of course, when it comes to defensive linemen, John, people seem to really focus on the sack numbers, the quarterback hurry numbers. While they are important, you have to focus on the run game as well. How would you say you fare against the run? Would you say you're pretty balanced in both pass attack and stopping the run?
Yeah, especially since through my experience at University of Charleston in the run game, I've always been to the tight end side, so I've always dealt with the tackle and the tight end double team, and then when I'm down on the inside, the guard and tackle double team. So I've had to make myself I have to be good in the run game and the pass game. So, yeah, I would say that I'm balanced, and my experience has served me well dealing with two bodies trying to block me, teaching me to stay low and play with my hands and hit my target on the offensive lineman. So, yeah, I would consider myself very well balanced between the passing game and the run game.
Always very important, always a plus when you can kind of do both. Obviously, the more you can do, the longer of a career you will have. And, John, what would you say is your biggest strength? I mean, we're talking about some of your positives right there and talking about how balanced you are in both the pass and the run. Biggest strength of your game, and maybe not necessarily a weakness, but what is something you'd still like to work on, something that you'd like to work the kinks out in?
Well, my strength, like I've said before, I'm definitely very physical, and that helps me a lot. You have to be physical. You have to be lethal at defensive line, and I think I possess those traits. And then besides just being a football player, I think I possess leadership skills as well. I'm very positive. I'm very upbeat on the field. So the guys around me I think they can rally around me, and I've served as in my junior and my senior year at University of Charleston. So I take on that leadership role. Even though I've got my hand in the dirt and, my back is to the rest of my guys, they know that I'm positive and I'm upbeat and I'm going to give them my all. So that's definitely probably the best part of my game would be my leadership skills. And then a weakness, being 6'5" and playing at Division II, I haven't taken much of initiative to play lower. And I know with the bigger physical players, these players I'll be playing with the Senior Bowl, and then obviously in the NFL you have to play low. The low man wins. So I have to work on getting my ped level down and using my legs a little bit more. But, that's some things that I've been working the kinks out with Brian Cox and then Derek, just working to loosen up my hips, loosen up my ankles, and help me to play with a lower pad level. Again,
when you're going to be down in Mobile, Alabama next week for the Reese Senior Bowl, there's going to be scouts from every NFL team. And not only scouts, you got general managers, NFL coaches, very many media members that are going to be asking you questions from left to right, a wide variety When you're asked to point out one game from your collegiate career over the past 4 years there at Charleston, John, which game would you suggest one of those coaches, one of those scouts to go back and check out?
I would say it would be the opening game from this past season, my senior year. It was a rivalry game, and we had lost to West Virginia State the year prior to for the first time in, I think, 11 years. So we were all fired up and riled up, and I just played relentless. I never stopped. My motor never stopped, and I didn't allow anybody to block me. I ran through everybody and got to the ball every single play. So definitely that opening game my senior year.
All right, sounds good. You know what? With that said, I'm going to have to go back and try and get my hands on some of that tape myself, John. Hey, a few more questions for you, then we'll let you go. Really do appreciate you taking some time this evening. How would you say? How would you talk about the level of competition that you did play? Again, national media, they're going to say, that's going to be one of your weaknesses is the level of competition that you played. But how about the man himself, John? How would you talk about the overall competition at the Mountain East Conference, the Division II level that you played against? And is there a specific player that stands out? Who would you say is the best player that you've lined up against over the years?
We've definitely produced some championship teams. University of Shepherd has made it to the Final Four. Concord University has made it to the Final Four. And then just this year, Notre Dame of Ohio made it to a Final Four. So we definitely produced some championship teams. Unfortunately, not the University of Charleston. Still working on it. But, out of University of Shepherd, my junior year, I played a tackle. His name was Levante Heights. He was pursuing the NFL as well. And unfortunately experienced a knee injury and kind of sold him short. He was also a Division I caliber player. Very good with his hands, very strong. I couldn't just completely overpower him. I actually had to use some technique and maybe perhaps some of my speed that I held back from the other players. I couldn't just power through him. That was a really fun game for me. I think I played one of my best games because I knew that the level of competition was better. I took a little bit more focus in the film room, focus on practice, because I knew that I was going to have to raise my competitiveness to compete with this kid. So definitely Levante Heights out of University of Shepherd.
Okay, sounds good. And like you said, there's been certainly some playoff teams. From that Mountain East Division, some championship winners as well. Past or present NFL player you choose, John, who would you say you model your game after? I mean, in today's day, everybody loves comparisons. Who would you say are a couple of players that you like to watch and take bits and pieces from their game and maybe add it on to your own?
Well, obviously, I think any tall defensive lineman would say J.J. Watt. I can't lie and say that I haven't watched film on him and tried to incorporate his game into mine. Definitely J.J. Watt first and foremost, and then to keep the Chicago crowd happy, I actually fell in love with this defense this past year. Khalil Mack, I followed him over to Chicago, and then before you know it, I'm following Chicago all year long. And then there's also Hakeem Hicks, who's in the middle, number 96, and he's a beast. So I've just been, to be honest with you, I've been modeling after this Chicago D-line because they have just dominated the NFL, and unfortunately, they were sold short. But they definitely have a championship-level defensive line. So I would say it would be J.J. Watt, Khalil Mack, and Hakeem Hicks would be three of the top defensive linemen that I would like to model my game after.
Well, certainly three of the best in the game right now. And I'll tell you what, John, you that statement alone just gained you a bunch of fans from the city of Chicago. Obviously, I know you would love to play for any of the 32 NFL organizations out there, John. But like you said, becoming more of a fan of this Bears defense this past season, the way that you've seen them play this past season, it doesn't look like they're going anywhere. It looks like they're going to be here to stay for a little while now. How much fun would it be to be a Chicago Bear, to wear the orange and blue, and play alongside some of these veteran guys like a Khalil Mack and Hakeem Hicks?
Well, I can't sell the other 31 teams short. There's great defensive linemen everywhere. I'd be happy with anywhere I'm going, but obviously to jump on board when Chicago's heading in the right direction would be awesome. To work alongside some of the greatest defensive linemen in the NFL right now. So yeah, I would love to strap on the Chicago jersey, but I can't lie to you and tell you that that's the only team I'd love to play for. I'd play with any of these defensive linemen and learn from them. But yeah, I mean, Hakeem Hicks and Khalil Mack, man, to line up on the other side of Mack and have Hakeem Hicks between us, that would be a dream come true.
Well, Ryan Pace, the team's general manager, certainly has an eye for small school talent, and I'm sure that you are certainly being evaluated. John, one last question before we let you go. Let's say we do have all 32 NFL general managers tuned in listening to this very interview. Why should they want the defensive end out of the University of Charleston, John Cominsky, a part of their organization?
Well, first, I'm dominant and I'm physical and I'm lethal. So I possess those traits that you can't coach in a defensive lineman. And then all the other, those are things that can be bred into somebody. Somebody can learn those skills. So I have the skills that you can't teach, and I'm willing to work on the skills that I need to learn. I'm very coachable. Brian Cox said it himself. I was able to run through a drill or learn a technique. I'd get it wrong the first time. I'd come back, listen to him for about 2 or 3 minutes, and I'd run it right the second time. So I'm very coachable, and I'm very willing to listen to the experts and mold my body and my play into whatever defense I get put into.
Well, John, great answer, great interview, great conversation. Really do appreciate your time this evening. I know it's a very busy time of the year for you, and really it's just getting started because once the Senior Bowl hits, I know your schedule is going to be hectic, more hectic from there. So we really do appreciate you taking the time this evening, and really wishing you the best, man. Again, a great story to follow. And for the listeners out there, really an easy player, an easy person to root for. So thank you very much, John. We'll ask you any final words, and any words you want to leave with the listeners. It's your player spotlight segment, so you could end it however you'd like.
Hey, Chicago, I fell in love with your defense, and, I wouldn't be mad if I end up there with you guys. Thank you for listening. Thanks, Chris, for having me on the show. I had a lot of fun.
Anytime. Absolutely my pleasure. There he goes. That's John Cominsky, the defensive end out of Division II's University of Charleston. Really great interview, really great conversation. He's going to knock it out of the park next week at the Reese's Senior Bowl. Certainly wishing him the best of luck. And again, you talk to him, you can listen, and you can hear the conviction in his voice. He's really determined to make this happen, and he's really going to have a big week next week in Mobile, Alabama. Not only on the field, but I believe a lot of coaches, a lot of general managers are going to be very impressed in conversation with the Division II standout, the reigning Mountain East Defensive Player of the Year. That is John Cominsky. Again, special thanks to him and his people for setting up that interview. A lot of fun chatting with him, and again, a great story. Again, not every year you hear about a prospect, a legit prospect, coming out of the University of Charleston. But here this year, 2019, we have one in John Cominsky, a name that certainly is to be watched out for in the coming months, as his draft stock is only pointing upward from here. Up next, we'll be chatting with George Bremer, the writer, the Indianapolis Colts beat writer for the Herald Bulletin. Again, a lot of news to get to with the hiring of Chuck Pagano, the now defensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears, taking over for Vic Fangio, who left to take the head coaching gig over at the Denver Broncos. Chuck Pagano, obviously a lot of experience in the NFL. Only 1 year, though, as a defense coordinator, and that was with the Baltimore Ravens. Right before he got the gig the year before he got the Colts head coaching gig. So there has been some questions about, okay, well, he's only been a defense coordinator for 1 year. How great is he really calling plays? We're going to find out about that and more with George Bremer coming up next. Also, the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, let's not forget about them while we have George on the air. The Indianapolis Colts, one of the comeback teams in the NFL, starting 1-5 this past season, finishing as a playoff team and beating the division rival Houston Texans in the wild card round of the NFL playoffs. On the road at that, I mean, really a great story right there with the Indianapolis Colts this season. It was awesome to see Andrew Luck back this season. So a lot to get to with George Bremer of the Herald Bulletin. We're going to start off talking about the Chuck Pagano hiring, and then we'll get to the 2018 season that the Indianapolis Colts just finished, unfortunately, in losing fashion to the Kansas City Chiefs, 31-13. A lot of people thought that would be a really close game, a really competitive game, a game that maybe the Indianapolis Colts would squeak out. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Again, 31-13 wasn't very close at all. But again, the season that the Colts had, very, very promising. A very promising future for not only that defense, but what you've seen out of Andrew Luck. A lot of promising pieces there in Indianapolis with the Colts, with what Frank Reich has there, with the Andrew Luck-led Indianapolis Colts. And with that said, we will bring in our next guest. He's George Bremer, again, of the Herald Bulletin. You can follow him on Twitter at GM Bremer. And our buddy George joins the show now. George, thanks for joining the show this evening. How's it going?
No problem. I'm glad to be here. It's going really well.
Well, George, as everybody knows, if they've been listening for since really I started, you are our go-to for Indianapolis Colts news, Indianapolis Colts coverage, and being here in Chicago, George, the Chicago Bears hired a new defensive coordinator, and that is the former head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, Chuck Pagano. Obviously, a lot of history there in Indianapolis. It all started with the Chuck Strong year, and a lot of ups and downs certainly throughout his tenure. But now he gets a new gig after being let go from the Colts last season. Took the year off, and here he is. He's getting back in the game. Defensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears. Arguably, a lot of people would say the number one defense this past season, led by, of course, Khalil Mack. What was your thoughts? What was your initial reaction when you seen that Chuck Pagano was going to be back in the NFL as a defense coordinator of the Chicago Bears, and how do you think he'll fare here in the Windy City?
Yeah, I think it's a really good fit. I think it's a really good spot for him and a really good chance for him to kind of rebuild his reputation and get himself positioned if he wants to make a run at another head coaching job down the road. Obviously, that Bears defense is stocked with talent, and I think that it fits what Pagano wants to do defensively. I mean, he never really had the resources from a personnel standpoint in Indianapolis that he wanted. He wanted to kind of adopt that same system Baltimore's run for years. They never really had the guys on the edge to make that happen. They never really had the playmakers in the secondary to make that happen. He's got all of that and more in Chicago, and I think he's going to really – one thing I know for sure about Chuck Pagano, the players will play hard for him. If nothing else, he will motivate those guys, and they will run through a wall for him. It was his biggest strength here. As head coach, he made that team believe. Even in year one, when the predictions were, 2 wins and rebuilding year, and they have the number 1 pick overall again, and he came out and had that team before the leukemia and before he went to the hospital. He had that team believing they could do something, they could win right away. And that's no accident. It's just the kind of guy that he is. We've always thought that he'd be a great kind of college head coach, because I think if he came into your living room, you know, mom and dad are going to want to send their kid to go play for Chuck Pagano. It's just the kind of personality he is. Players still swear by him. You look at guys like Reggie Wayne on Twitter. As soon as he got this job, I know Reggie Wayne, Matt Overton, several of his former players immediately on there saying, great hire for Chicago. You know, they'll go to fight with this guy anytime, and I think it's a really good fit for the Bears.
You know, talk about the personnel that he's had over the years. Again, while he was there in Indianapolis, the Colts didn't really have a defense that blew anybody away. How much of that was on the personnel, and how much was that on the coaching of the defensive side of the football?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was personnel, but you can't rule out the coaching. And I think it was interesting in that there were times when he talked about taking a more hands-on approach, but I think a lot of it he left to his coordinators, Greg Minusky at first, and in the last couple of years, Ted Monachino, who may also be on his way to Chicago as a position coach for Pagano. I think there was probably one of the biggest criticisms and one of his biggest drawbacks as a head coach was in-game adjustments. You know, I think a lot of times they didn't look prepared to start, or they wouldn't come out of the second half with the same kind of intensity. They had a good first half. The other team would adjust at halftime. You'd see the Colts kind of drop off a little bit in the second half. The other times they would come out and have a bad first half, and then things would spiral out of control. I think that was probably the biggest concern while he was here, and that's something that obviously he'll need to fix. But I think a lot of that did come with the fact they never had, you know, in Baltimore he had Terrell Suggs, obviously. He had Elvis Dumerville. He could come at quarterbacks from a lot of different angles. In the first year, they had Freeney and Mathis. And then after that, he didn't really have a healthy Robert Mathis after, I think, 2013. And they were trying to get it done with Corey Redding and Eric Walden. And Minusky in particular got quite a bit from those guys considering, and they always gave great effort. But I don't think any offensive coordinator was staying up at night worrying about that Indianapolis pass rush and what it might mean for them on Sunday.
You know, when I think about some of those Colts teams that Chuck Pagano had there in Indianapolis, and I understand that it wasn't just his decision making. Obviously, Grigson was a big part of that as well. But I think of some of the draft busts or some of the draft picks that just didn't work out, such as Bjorn Werner in the first round. Was that all on Ryan Grigson, the general manager at the time, or did Chuck Pagano have any say in some of these draft picks that didn't seem to work out, specifically on the defense side of the football?
Yeah, he absolutely had a say in some of them. I know specifically T.J. Green, DeJon Smith were two guys that he really went to bat for, two guys that he really felt like could play in this league and could make a difference in this league. And I think player development was another thing that didn't really get up to par during his time here. You never really saw the young guys, with just a couple of exceptions and really none that I could think of on defense. You never really saw the young guys take those big steps. There would be flashes here and there, but no consistency in that regard. And I think that's something that is a concern, but I don't know how much that had to do with him adjusting to his duties as a head coach. And I think there's a lot of guys who are just cut out to be better coordinators than they are to be better position coaches than they are head coaches. When you get to that spot, there's a lot more on your plate, a lot more that you have to deal with, a lot more that you have to consider and be concerned with on a weekly basis. And I think that kind of kept Chuck from really being as involved as he wanted to be. The one probably big success story of his time there, his greatest strength, when you look at throughout his career, his greatest strength has been with the defensive backs. And I think the biggest success story during his time in Indianapolis was Vontae Davis. He came in from Miami as kind of a disappointing pick. a guy who hadn't lived up to his potential. He'd been really inconsistent, lots of peaks and valleys, and he really developed into a Pro Bowl player for a couple of years under Pagano. In 2014 in particular, a little bit of 2013, he was a shutdown guy. It was pretty much teams really weren't looking to his side of the field at all, and Chuck Pagano had a really big impact on that, had a really big say in that. That being said, some of the younger guys like Smith and Green never really did develop in the same way. So, it's hard to give him all the credit for Davis and not give him some of the blame for the other guys who didn't get to that level.
We're chatting with George Bremer of the Herald Bulletin. You can follow him on Twitter at GM Bremer, getting a Indianapolis point of view on the Chicago Bears' new defensive coordinator, Chuck Pagano. And George, when looking at the Pagano hiring, obviously this all took place once Vic Fangio took the head coaching gig with the Denver Broncos. If there was one downfall on Vic Fangio, if you were to ask some people in Chicago, it was that he could get a little conservative with the defensive play calling, and he wasn't very big on sending extra pressure to the quarterback. He wasn't very big on blitzing the quarterback. Now, from what I've read so far and from what I've heard listening to some Indianapolis sports radio over the past couple of days, it sounds like Chuck Pagano, it sounds like the Bears might be getting maybe not necessarily the complete opposite of that, but it sounds like Chuck Pagano will not be afraid to blitz the quarterback, especially with the weapons at his disposal on this Bears defense.
Yeah, I think when you look at what the Bears have in Khalil Mack and what they have just really across the entire defense, it's going to be aggressive. I really believe that. He's going to come after the quarterback. It was always a philosophy here. It didn't always get done. I think they were more aggressive when Cominsky was the defensive coordinator than they were under Monachino. I'm not really sure, whether that was personnel. I think that was part of it because Cominsky did have at least some of Robert Mathis during most of his run. Monachino really didn't have Mathis very much at all during his time there. So, I think that made a difference. But you go back to, I believe it was 2013, Robert Mathis led the league in sacks, was right up there in the race to be the defensive player of the year. And that's what this scheme can do. That's what the Pagano scheme can do. It's very big for edge rushers. It's a big – I think it's going to be good for Eddie Jackson. I think he's a guy who's going to be a playmaker in this team. When you look at what they ask out of the defensive backs and what they want, kind of how they want that to look and how those guys are coached and taught to play. So I think there's a lot that the Bears have that line up well with what Pagano wants to do. Now, what'll be interesting is where's he at? It's been a while. He was here in Chicago for 6 years and he took last year off, so it's really been 7 years since he's been a defensive coordinator. Offensive football in the NFL has changed a lot in that time. So it'll be interesting to see how he's been able to adapt to that because he didn't, he wasn't thinking only on defense as a head coach. So I think there could be a little bit of a learning curve, and that it'll be interesting to see how that goes for him, kind of dropping back into a new era, dealing with guys like Patrick Mahomes, for instance, who we really didn't see anything like that during his time as a defense coordinator. It'll be interesting to see how he adjusts and how long that learning curve is.
That's really a great point right there, George. That really is a great point. Some of these offenses and the offensive game, it seems like it's changing year by year. So when you miss a year of NFL football, it could be a pretty big deal. Now, hopefully working with a creative offensive mind like Matt Nagy, hopefully that could kind of pick Pagano up a little bit, but I guess only time will tell on that. One last thing on Pagano, and then I just want to get your quick thoughts on the Colts this season. Again, a really big season, a much improved season for the Indianapolis Colts, 10-6, making a playoff appearance and even winning a playoff game. But one last thing on Chuck Pagano, and that is, you did mention how well liked he is with the players. There, some of the former players like Reggie Wayne, Matt Overton, tweeting how happy that they were to see Chuck Pagano back in the game of football. I know Pagano's actually out coaching a college football all-star game, the NFLPA game, there in Los Angeles, excuse me. But how about Chuck Pagano, the person? I mean, everybody, all fans, everybody across the NFL, everybody across the nation was obviously rooting for him and rooting for the Colts when they were going through the whole hashtag Chuck Strong campaign, and when he was going through leukemia. And I mean, I think everybody still, when they think of Chuck Pagano, they think about that season and they think about what he's been through. You know, and working with him as a member of the Indianapolis Colts media, George, I mean, what's he like to deal with from a day-to-day basis? Now being a defensive coordinator, he'll be dealt with by the media from a week-to-week basis during the season.
Yeah, he was, I think towards the end he got a little tired of us and some questions coming in and being fired at him all the time. But, you know, he's always, he gets a little off the wall sometimes. I remember there was a Groundhog Day press conference where he kept referencing the movie, and then some of the guys who are on the beat regularly hadn't seen it, so he showed up the next week with DVDs to make sure that they could be caught up on that. There was a bizarre press conference where we got talking about hurricanes forming off the coast of Africa and how they gain strength through their path across the Atlantic Ocean, and then when they hit the United States, the damage they can cause. And that all started with talking about the kind of fourth quarter collapses that the team continued to have in that 2017 season. So, you know, he's a colorful guy in that sense. He doesn't take himself too seriously at times. And I think one of the big things with him is he's one of these coaches that talks about family, that talks about relationships. And I think Pagano's one of the guys that really gets it in that regard. He understands that football is only going to be one part of your life. You know, coaches are hired to be fired. They're going to move on. You're going to go elsewhere. You're going to start a new job. You're going to meet new people. He wants to make sure that he leaves these guys with something that they remember, and it works. I mean, you go through the guys in Indianapolis and how they feel about him, but, you know, as far back as his Ravens days, Charles Suggs is still really close with him. Ed Reed, who he dealt with as far back as the University of Miami, his time there is still very close with him. Frank Gore, you know, part of the reason Frank Gore and Andre Johnson came and signed with Indianapolis is because of their dealings with Chuck when they were at Miami. Stuart Schweiger, I know, you know, he's a guy who played for Chuck with the Raiders. He's back in West Lafayette as a radio host now. When he asked for Chuck Pagano, immediately Chuck's there. You know, he really believes in that family idea, that family atmosphere, and I think the Bears will see that right away. I think this defense will immediately feel like he's a guy that they want to play for, and they'll relate to him pretty quickly. I just think when I look at from the outside, I look at the atmosphere the Bears had this year with the celebrations in the locker room and just sort of the way that team had fun and played for each other. I think Chuck Pagano really fits in, and I think it's something that he'll enjoy and just blend right into.
Wow, Stu Schweiger. I don't know when the last time I heard that name, but it certainly brought back some old Madden video game memories, George. and yes, that's all I had to take away from what you just said. No, I'm just kidding. So it sounds like the Bears are getting just about what I expected. I mean, and Matt Nagy said in his press conference yesterday a very aggressive mindset, but obviously well-liked and well-respected, been in the game for many, many years. So it's going to be very interesting to watch what Chuck Pagano does with this Bears defense, which was, of course, the league's leader in takeaways a year ago. George, I just want to end it on one quick note. Obviously, you do cover the Indianapolis Colts, again, for the Herald Bulletin. I just got to ask you, this past season for the Indianapolis Colts, where does it rank in terms of most interesting seasons you've covered? I mean, this is a team that, again, you could start from about a year ago today when there was rumors that Josh McDaniels was going to be the team's new head coach. Obviously, we all know what happened there. They then go to Frank Reich, the former quarterbacks coach for the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, and it almost felt like when they hired him that this was their second choice. This wasn't their top guy. This was their second choice. But it seems to have really worked out very well. Obviously, it's great to see number 12 back in action, throwing the football again, and he had a great season, especially for being out for, a year and a half or whatever it was. Where does this rank? Again, a 1-5 start, finishing the season 10-6, second in the division, but beating the division rival Houston Texans on the road in the wild card round of the playoffs. Unfortunately, the season did end this past weekend at Kansas City, 31-13. But again, it seemed like it was a roller coaster of a season. You started very, very low to work your way up, and again, just a very fun and exciting season for the Colts. At least that's what it seemed like from afar. I got to think this season was a lot of fun to cover.
It was. It was a blast. It really is right up there with the 2012 Chuck Strong season. I mean, that year's always going to stand out because I don't know if there's anything quite like it in NFL history. You know, watching Bruce Arians come out and talk about leaving the light on in Chuck's office and having a goal. At the time, the team was 1-2, and they had just lost to Jacksonville at home on an 80-yard touchdown pass by Blaine Gabbert. So they weren't feeling real confident. And here's Bruce Arians standing up there saying, we're going to make the playoffs. We're going to extend the season for Chuck Pagano. And everybody was like, that's a great sentiment, Bruce, but come on, let's be realistic. And that team goes and makes the playoffs. And, of course, Arians ends up being the coach of the year and gets a head coaching job for the first time in his career in Arizona. And, you know, that was kind of a fairy tale season. And this is right there with that. I think this one had a different feel, though, because that season kind of felt like there was some kind of fairy tale dust just spread across everybody. They were winning games in miraculous ways. This feels like it's the start of something bigger and long-term in Indy. You know, they were winning because of a solid offensive line, because of a versatile offense that could run the ball to complement what Andrew Luck can do, because of a defense that really outperformed all expectations. Matt Eberflus did a great job in his first year as a defensive coordinator. I think the Colts are really happy that he's going to be coming back. I would put it right there with 2012, and I think it might be better remembered in the long term because I really do think this is the start of a pretty good prolonged run for this franchise. They got a lot of capital. I think $122 million in cap space. They got 9 draft picks, and they've got a good young core already. So there's a lot to build around, and I think Frank Reich Chris Ballard put it best yesterday during the season-ending press conference. He was asked about everything that happened with Josh McDaniels. And he said about 30 minutes into his interview with Reich, he started thinking about what an idiot he was for not having Reich on the top of the list to begin with. And towards the end of that quote, he said that God sometimes gives you good things even when you don't deserve them. And he feels like Frank Reich was that kind of gift for him.
Yeah, and, you know, you hear stuff like that, and, you know, normally you think to yourself, you know, you have to say stuff like that. You have to find something to say when something disastrous like that happens. But it really does seem to have worked out in the Colts' favor. And, again, a 10-6 season after starting 1-5 and having a rough couple of past years, and with the career of Andrew Luck kind of in jeopardy, not really sure what's going to go on there. To see what he was able to do this past season, it was really just a lot of fun to watch the Indianapolis Colts this past season. George, really do appreciate you hopping on the show tonight. As always, it's a pleasure to chat with you. And, again, your time is greatly appreciated. Before I let you go, please let the listeners out there know where they can check out your work at.
Yeah, absolutely. On Twitter, I'm at GM Bremer, and our website is heraldbulletin.com.
Awesome. George, really do appreciate it. I would say enjoy the off season, but as we know, there is no off season in the NFL. I will be seeing you at the NFL Combine in a little over a month, my man.
Yeah, no doubt. Looking forward to it. Glad to see you every year down here.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure, man. It's always a blast. There he goes, George Bremer at GM Bremer on Twitter. Check out his work over at the Herald Bulletin in Indianapolis. Again, any Indianapolis Colts news, go to that guy right there. Really a class act and a great journalist, a great writer, and a great beat writer for the Indianapolis Colts. So we got a pretty good idea on what the Bears are getting in Chuck Pagano, the former Colts head coach, former Ravens defensive coordinator. And then, of course, we were able to kind of talk a little bit about the ups and downs of this past season for the Indianapolis Colts. As George put it, it was his most fun, exciting season that he's covered since the right up there with the 2012 Indianapolis Colts when the Chuck Strong campaign was going on, when Bruce Arians took over as interim head coach while Chuck Pagano was getting his treatment for leukemia. And that team went on to make a playoff run as well. So that says a lot right there, because George said it perfectly. That season, the 2012 season, there seemed to have been a fairy tale storyline, storybook kind of feel to that season, with everything going on with the Indianapolis Colts, with Chuck Pagano and the Chuck Strong campaign. I mean, everybody in the NFL was really buying into it, and I think there was a spot in everybody's heart that was rooting for the Indianapolis Colts that season. That's going to do it. That's going to wrap it up for tonight's show. Special thanks to 2019 NFL Draft Prospect, the Division II star out of the University of Charleston, John Cominsky, for joining the show this evening. He'll be getting ready for the Senior Bowl. He'll be in Mobile, Alabama a week from today, getting ready to play in that game next Saturday, the 26th at Ladd Peebles Stadium. Again, an under-the-radar prospect, what they would call a diamond in the rough prospect, but certainly a name to keep an eye on, as his name is rising in the NFL draft world. Also, special thanks to George Bremer of the Herald Bulletin in Indianapolis, giving us some great insight, an Indianapolis point of view on the Chicago Bears' new defensive coordinator, Chuck Pagano. For John Cominsky, for George Bremer, I'm your host, Chris Shanafelt. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And no, I did not forget, special show announcement tomorrow, 4:30 p.m. Central Time. Same place. I will be joined by David Kaplan of ESPN 1000, his radio show Captain Company, also NBC Sports Chicago. We're going to talk some more Bears. We got some Bears coverage coming for you tomorrow with David Kaplan. Big-time guest right there, somebody I've grown up watching, grown up listening to, and certainly one of the people I've looked up to in this business. So really looking forward to knocking out that interview again tomorrow with David Kaplan, 4:30 Central Time. Again, special thanks, John Cominsky and George Bremer, for joining today's show. I am your host, Chris Shanafelt. Until next time, everybody.